Over the years, operating my functional medicine practitioner slash health coach business, or I've noticed some correlations with people who have specific pathologies. It's not my scope to diagnose these people or cure them or anything like that. I can't be doing those things. But I had been noticing some really, really interesting correlations, and PCOS and bipolar depression are really big ones that I've encountered a lot. Um, PCOS is exclusive to women. Bipolar depression can be between the sexes. I have mostly just worked with women, but they'll have worked with men who have bipolar depression. And a lot of people have different perspectives on how to ameliorate these. Some people are using Rife machines to zap parasites in the small intestine, and then all of a sudden they don't have bipolar like symptoms anymore. And then there are other people who draw conclusions, like in the natural doctor space. A lot of them are, noticing that there are correlations with molds and candida yeasts, with PCOS or even endometriosis. Based on my own research and my theories on it, I believe it could be potentially true because you can send in natural antifungals to reduce the problem on some level. I do also believe that molecular mimicry is a big part of it. This is a process where both molds and yeast, mostly yeast, are able to essentially mimic our tissue to evade the immune system. And so they may be a part of all that goes on with autoimmunity, where maybe the immune system's actually attacking a fungus, not just our tissue. But it's hard to say. There's not a lot of in vivo evidence out there. In vivo would be something that's a lot more empirical scientifically. It's a full lens and view into the system. I'll say from my experience, though, that oddly, all the women who've worked with me who have PCOS have some kind of wound from men. It's typically the father. It's the majority of the time. Some wound with dad. Either he's there or he's gone, but it's usually indicating that a woman had to become masculine to survive, to get things done, and or she decided it was subconsciously safer to be masculine, or maybe she had a bad relationship with mom and she's better as the guy, and she ends up producing more androgens by effect of that. And then potentially there's interactions that go on that can maybe make the cysts that form on the ovaries. Anatomically, people might think that's crazy, but I do believe in how emotion can tie into our organs. I believe some Ayurvedic perspectives believe this. I wouldn't say that every pathology is always connected somewhat to some emotion, but based on these two, there seems to be some interesting correlations. So with PCOS, some extreme cases might be like incredible insulin sensitivity, to the point that they have insulin resistance and or diabetes, and they end up developing, in worst cases, hirsutism, where they have they can develop a beard. And then, before that might be that they get excessive muscle growth. Maybe their sexual preferences change because of the masculinity. They prefer to be with men who are more effeminate and they can control, or they end up preferring something else. But we won't go into that on YouTube. But generally, across the board, it seems to be a heightened need to be androgenic. Or it's some kind of anxiety-based masculinity, where the anxiety is triggering her into a way of being in a state of survival. But yeah, it's an interesting experience seeing that with the women I've worked with. It's very unfortunate because very progressed versions, once they pass the age of 40, they could potentially, their BMI can end up going in different directions, and they can end up looking a bit oblong on a physical level. And this is kind of sad because a lot of women want to be attracted to, or men to look at them, and sometimes they establish their identity with the PCOS, and they start to just become more focused on being useful in society, rather than just being, this attractive, pretty woman who inspires people and is more energetic in perspective. Like, they go into like the physical space. I see this a lot, where their ego starts to shift. They very much put import toward their career. There's another category that I'll go into in a different video, but I call them the fight or flight mom or the fight or flight woman. These women are, higher androgen but not PCOS. They do also have large egos and focus on career, but that's completely different. And then we have bipolar depression. This one was super interesting to me. I came to a conclusion with this one a little later, and I'm not 100% certain with it, like the PCOS one. These are my experiences, and based on my own research. You guys can obviously go and look and find other things that is out there for you to research and to be able to conflict or object to my statements. With bipolar depression, I dated a few girls who had it. I've also had clients who had it, men and women. And I've always been very fascinated by it, because to me, it's not just some manic state that people enter. To me, it's like a kind of toxic masculine state, and it's not always entirely toxic. I mean, I guess on some level you could always see it as toxic, but I feel that there is an androgenic component here, where people are shifting to other sides of their mind, where they're entering the feminine versus the masculine, etc., etc. Obviously, it needs a lot more exploration, but I believe it is centered in the mother. All the people I know who have bipolar depression have really bad relationships with mom, or they didn't have a feminine example in their lives. I've discussed this with other people, and their propositions are that there's some emotional instability there, and the mother brings that to the plate. And that is very much possible. I very much believe that. But it is super fascinating how there's always this microbe connected to it as well, like some other physical factor. Because I've definitely seen people cure their bipolar depression by just going after some parasite in their body, which is super fascinating. They didn't have to go and fix their mother wounds. They just killed some bug. But then you could say the same way like PCOS. You have the yeast factor. Maybe you got to go after the yeast, change your diet, reduce insulin resistance, and all of a sudden you have PCOS fading away. But I have seen women get past PCOS very rapidly by letting go of the ego, getting into their feminine, focusing on polarity principles, and also doing the diet. It just goes really hand in hand. It's just all one thing. Like what I do in my business, I'm always having people do the physical health and the spiritual health and the mental health. It's all one. So yeah, anyway, these are some correlations that I've made over the years, and I'm not saying they're absolutes, definitely not, but it's pretty weird, the amount of correlations there are and the consistency behind it. And maybe you're skeptical, thinking that there's a lot of men out there create wounds in women. But I think like there's a significance to it. I think that for some women, maybe they had a poor diet, yeast end up growing, they become opportunistic, and then they wait for us to have emotional wounds, and they take over a said organ that's associated and colonize it, and then they got a problem on their hands. That's entirely possible in a theoretical model. But yeah, there's some interesting connections there, and I just wanted to share that with all of you guys today. I do not personally have these problems. I'm not a woman, so I don't have PCOS, and I don't have bipolar depression. But I can understand, though, by experience on some level, because of my health, I've had to oscillate between the masculine and the feminine, and it characteristically can have some similarities to bipolar depression. And if I really crud on my diet and I really do the wrong things in my life, I can very easily dip into my feminine side and get lost there. So anyway, like and subscribe if you want to stick around and hear more. So thanks.